Welcome everyone to Chess in 21st Century. Actually, I had something else prepared for today. There's an Indian boy who's 11 years old who just broke a record. Actually, I think he's 10 years old. Who broke a record by becoming the youngest IM in history. But the Grand Chess Tour started today, so I was watching the game, so I thought this guy's gonna have a long career, so we can come back to him later. Does anyone know what the Grand Chess Tour is? Right, so it's a tour, so it's a bunch of tournaments. So so there's Paris, Belgium, Single Cup, which is going to be right here in August. No, I was thinking when. I know where I am. And London in December. So the Rapid, so there's going to be 2 Rapid tournaments, 2 Blitz tournaments. Does everyone know what Rapid is? Yeah, Rapid is a faster, so there are different times controls. So when we play classical chess, it's the long one that goes on for 6 hours. Blitz is only 5 minutes, so it's like the most fun one to watch. And Rapid is somewhere in between, so like you have time to think during your games, but not a lot. So today was the Rapid portion, so it was game 25 plus 10-second increment. An increment means every time you make a move, you hit the clock, you get 10 seconds more on your clock. So if you're really down on time and you make a lot of moves really fast, you're going to get a lot of time on your clock, and then the game continues. So unlike in a Blitz game where you're trying to flag your opponent, you cannot do it when there's an increment. So the top 10 players are playing: Magnus Carlsen, Laurent Abrahamyan. We have 3 Americans playing: Fabiano, Nakamura, and Veselin. So a lot of interest in the US to watch this because we have 3 Americans playing. So this game was between Fressinet and Caruana. So Caruana is our current US champion. Fressinet is from France. I want to say it's the number 2 French player. So he was having a very bad tournament up until this point. He lost the first 2 games, and psychologically it's very hard when you're losing a lot of games to recover from those games because you're not feeling well, and you just have this mentality, why am I playing so bad? But good chess players are very good at recovering from their bad losses. So this game was this is the game where Fressinet was up a pawn, but it's a rook ending, and rook endings are always complicated. It's never, hardly ever just a straightforward win, especially when there are other pawns on the board. So White sacrificed his pawn on h3. There was a white pawn to run the king to help this pawn to promote. Forgot. So Black has this passed pawn, White has this passed pawn. So who's playing for a win here? White, because because Black's king is not completely useless, and in endgame we know how important the king is, because there's no piece to checkmate you, so you're supposed to use your king. So here, Black played rook c3. So which way is the king going?
Well, I'm probably wrong, so it's probably not b.
There's a problem with going to b5. So what are our other options? King b7. So if we want to promote the pawn, it doesn't make that much sense to put our king in front of it. But we still want the king to be close enough so we can protect the pawn. So d7. So we have a plan of pushing, and then if you attack, I can come close to my pawn. So let me show you. So the problem with b5 is, like, if you go here...
No, king at a6.
So king a6 actually loses. Who can tell me why? Yeah, rook a3. So now you're playing way too slow. I have counterplay. If I didn't have the pawn, then yes, you have all the time in the world, you can do whatever you want. But I have counterplay. I have a pawn that's about to queen, so you can just take your time and forget about it.
Okay.
So king d7. So attack. King c7. So it doesn't make sense to go back to c6 because check, I have nowhere to go. So king c7, and now king b8. So now again, we're close to our pawn, but we can't push our pawn. And we make our opponent waste time. So opponent pushes, so we push. So now white has a very simple threat. King out and queen. So what black plays very tricky. Plays rook a3. So what to do? So I have to say, I was very impressed by how white played this because, first of all, rook endgames are very tricky and they're playing rapid, which means they start with 25 minutes, and this is move 50, so they had very little time. And with little time on your clock to sit down and calculate something precisely, that's very impressive. But then again, that's why they're the top players in the world. So you want to take, you don't care. Okay, so you want to take the rook, so I get a queen. King a7. So now you're saying you're going to queen your pawn because I don't have checks. Right? Right. Okay, so what else can I do? Yeah, so queen c6 is possible, but queen c1 is a tempo move. So queen c1 attacking the rook. So you don't have time to get a queen because I'm going to take your rook with a check. So you have to move your rook. So the question is where? Yeah, keep in mind you want to keep your rook close to your king because if you separate them, then with checks I can take it. So either a5 or a6. So let's try one. So let's go a6. And then? Queen c5. So what happens if you block?
Goes a5.
a5, and then you cannot go back, your rook is hanging, so now we're just repeating. So okay, so what if this check, I go here? Yeah, queen d5, and again it's going to be a draw. If you play here, I'm just going to circle around your king. And you cannot get out of this box. So check, check. So we're just going to repeat the position forever. If you try rook a5, what can I do now? Yeah, queen c3, queen c7, again, attacking this rook. And the problem is, even if you play here, you're not threatening to queen because of the pin. So you cannot make progress. So instead, rook c1, again, same idea. If I put my rook somewhere random, let's say, okay, this is not so random because I'm attacking. But now I cannot win because you're just going to keep checking. And you're going to keep harassing my king. So the reason the rook goes to c1 and a1 is to block this file. So my king can get out without all these checks. So now rook c3. So now we have to figure out what's the difference between taking on a3 and c3. And if that works. So rook c3. So we have to consider taking because, I mean, okay, white has other ways to play, but if you can find a precise, you do precise calculation, you calculate out your win, then you win the game. So rook c3 and queen. So first of all, what's the difference between my rook being on c3 or a3? Yeah. Exactly. So the difference is rook c3, king c8, oops, sorry, queen, king c8. So first of all, there is no check. And if they try to attack your rook, you can gain a tempo by checking. So if they come here, because your rook on a3 was restricted, now you have a check. And then next move, you can get a queen. So queen h8 was played, Queen h3 was the threat. What is black's threat? Queen e5. Right, if we get a queen, I hate how it shows the move. And then, oops, so we don't want to allow that. So rook e3, I'll take on f2. King d6. I think if he moves, you're going to resign. King d6, I'll take this with a check. So we need our king here to support this pawn. So you just need to make queen e5 impossible. So you either have to move your king or... the problem with rook g3 is if I take on f2, your rook is hanging. So you're up a rook, but your threat is to get a queen. If I get your rook, then you're not doing anything. So you have to hang on to your rook. So how else can we stop queen e5? So either we have to move the king or rook c5. So we take. So you cannot move your king. If you move your king, I put a queen behind the pawn, you cannot queen. You just need to find a good place with the rook. Rook c6, and black doesn't have checks anymore. If queen a7, king c8. And then if I attack your rook again, rook c7, which is the whole point of this whole line. So again, we ended up in the same position. We lost the pawn, but we're up a rook, so we don't really care about that pawn. It's the same. It was the same idea as here. Where are we? Yeah, if they attack our rook, we're gonna check on queen. So we just went around and we ended up in the same place. So here, check. So check. So who can tell me why is white repeating? Right, because you have increment. If you repeat the position, so you don't want to repeat the position 3 times because you don't want to end up in drawing it accidentally. But if you repeat it twice, you get 20 seconds on your clock. And when you have less than a minute or 2 minutes, 20 seconds is a lot of time. Okay, so let's see how we're going to get out of this check. So check. I would not recommend rook a7. So let's try rook a7. Oops, that's not rook a7. So what if I check you? So you have to be careful. Precision. So what's your next move? You want to block, right? So I'm going to check. Cannot get out of checks. Check. Because you put your king in a box with nowhere to go, so now my queen is just going around. Oh, sorry. So here, so what do we do? So we have to block with the queen. So queen d5. So it repeats again. Actually here he repeats because after queen a5 you can simply just go king b8 and he's out of checks and you're threatening mate. So queen went here. So you need to use the fact that these pawns are here and they're kind of blocking the queen, so the queen cannot really... Yeah, something similar in the game. So queen here, check. So the point of the queen being here is what? Now you're threatening checkmate. Actually, let me go move by move if I went too fast. So you're blocking with the queen. So first of all, let me ask this question. If I trade queens and take this pawn, what's the easiest way to win this? Yeah, rook f8 looks good too. I was thinking about rook c5, but rook f5 also looks good. Again, we want to keep this king away from the pawns, and our king is very close. So rook f8 looks very good to me. Rook c5 also looks very strong. So check. So we block. Now we have a threat. If the queen goes away, of course black doesn't want to trade, we're going to meet. So takes, f5. Right, we don't want to take and let the king in or the log connected pawns. Our king is close enough that it should be a win, but there's no reason in making things complicated. Because the pawns are separated, our king is close, we have an extra rook, so it should be a simple win. So king f6. Because if you take, king g5, and if you try to push the pawn, then my rook's going to come and collect the pawns. I cannot do this. Okay, so king f6. Okay, so how are we going to win this? So where do we need our rook?
G4.
So when your opponent has passed pawns, where do you want your rook? Behind the pawn. So you cannot come behind the pawn because of the king. So if rook e7, I'm going to take, check, king here. Actually, I'm not sure you're even winning this. Because now your pieces are awkward and your king cannot get in. I'm going to keep shouldering your king. So you don't want this to happen. The key is to get your king in and to keep this king away. So how are we going to get our rook behind the pawns? Rook b8. Again, simple. Rook f8 because we don't want the king coming in and supporting the pawns.
Take a pawn.
Yeah. He could have also played king e5. So one winning move. King is in a corner.
King f5.
King f5. Threatening mate and no way to stop. We can't even go king h4 because I'll checkmate you. Yeah, so he resigned here. So I thought this was a very great calculation by Fressinet. Just calculated the whole line out, played very quickly, very confidently, everything accurate. And again, with little time on your clock, it's a very hard thing to do. And as we saw, it's so easy to blunder the perpetual in that position. Okay, so I have 2 more games. I don't think we'll be able to look at both of them. So let me see which one I want to pick. So Fressinet beating Caruana was a big upset because Fressinet is the lowest rated player. There are several upsets today. Magnus Carlsen actually flagged against Wesley, so yeah, he did. Yeah, he said he had 2 moves. He was picking between the 2 winning moves, and then he completely lost about his time. And actually, he's the one who looked at the time and said, "Oh, I ran out of time." And I don't know who was more surprised, him or Wesley. It was just very strange. Because I was watching, I thought, oh, Magnus queened and Wesley resigned, and then next thing I know, no, I mean he was like really upset, but like he came back to shake his hand, which I thought was really nice. And actually, 2015 first round of the Grandmaster, Magnus Carlsen again flags against Topalov in a completely winning position. He's sitting there calculating a win, is unsure, so he's thinking, and then runs out of time and loses. So that's how he starts his tournaments. Yeah, he won 3 games in a row. So he should have had 4.5 out of 5 because that game was completely winning in one move. He could have ended the game. He won 3 games. Like after he lost, he beat Maxime Vacher-Legraf. Like he's playing a beginner almost. He just crushed him. So obviously he's just playing well. He just had bad luck. Okay, so Topalov Caruana. So Topalov is having a horrible tournament, and can I move this? And he hasn't been really playing well lately. I think he's either lost his motivation or I don't know what's up with him. But of course, he's still a very strong player. He lost 3 games in a row, and then he beat Anish Giri. Again, it's very, very tough thing to do. Losing a lot of games, recovering from your losses, it's so hard to do. And especially for them, the whole world is watching, and there's so much ego involved as well. All right. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. Is anyone familiar with this opening? Scotch. So here, so knight f6. So what does white do to protect the pawn? Don't say bishop d3. Here? Yeah, so if you move the bishop out, it's very unfortunate because you blocked your queen, so now your knight's hanging. So what happens if you play knight c3? So what opening is this? Is this a Scotch?
Scotch gambit.
No, gambit, that means you're giving stuff away. Definitely not giving anything away here. No, so this is the same opening as this. Knight here, knight here. So 4 knights. So you're playing 4 knights. So if you're playing the Scotch, you don't necessarily want to play 4 knights. So white takes, e5. So this is all theory. Queen e7. So there's a whole reason behind this move, and the reason is now you you get this pin, which is a major line. Instead, he goes knight back. And the whole point is to see if this pawn on e5, if it's going to be a strength for white or a weakness that I'm going to be able to eventually attack and get. So knight out. Queen here, freeing the bishop, and also putting pressure on the pawn. Queen e4. It doesn't, of course, white cannot develop the bishop this way. This pawn is hanging, so the queen needs to move so the bishop can get out. And I was looking at this position. I was looking in the database. The main move is to put the bishop on d3, so people don't really put the bishop here. So bishop out. Has to defend the pawn. So d6. So why is white giving up this pawn? Wait, did I say white is giving up this pawn? Sorry. Oh my god. I've been up since, I don't know, 5:30 today. So why is black giving up this pawn? So what happens if I take this pawn? Right, so we take on e5. So white took on c7, but let's evaluate this endgame. So let's say take, and which pawn do you want to take? I want to take the c pawn. So we have 2 options. We can take the c pawn, we can take the e pawn. I think both of them are fine. But how would we evaluate, okay, we'll take this one, for example. How would we evaluate this endgame? How do you know your position's good? Should you be defending? Should you be playing for a win? Unless it's obvious you're completely winning, like you have an extra coin or something. Like, how do you know? Okay. So there's a list of things we have to look at, right?
Materials equal.
Right, so there's a lot of things to consider. And sometimes it happens we consider one thing and we forget about everything else. So a lot of times it can be relative. So for example, my a7 pawn is an isolated pawn, but are you ever going to attack this pawn? I mean, not very likely, right? Because given where your pieces are and where my pawn is, like which piece is going to come after this pawn. So not so relevant in this position. So materials equal, the queens are gone. So king safety not so important right now. So next we move to the pieces. So whose pieces are better? Why? They're stronger.
Threaten the pawn.
Right, because they're more active, right? Bishops, both bishops in the center attacking all diagonals. This is attacking, this is defending, this is attacking, this is not even out yet. So it's not clear how white is going to defend this pawn. So I think taking on c4 is also fine for similar reasons. I'm not sure which one. Maybe taking on e5, you can just win the c4 pawn immediately. Because I cannot push the pawn, there's a check. So white decided to get greedy and take this pawn. So why did black sacrifice a pawn? Why do we ever sacrifice anything?
Tactics or tempo.
To get something, right? You don't just, because if you don't get anything, that's not sacrifice, it's just giving it away. So you need to get something. So what can we get in this position? Do we have anything immediate? Which pawn? This pawn? Yeah, if you take that pawn, you're a little, like, helping me a little bit because my bishop is not out, and you're just inviting my bishop into the game. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's true. But here I can throw in a move. And now, yeah. What about what? Okay, so let's see. So where is black's compensation with this pawn? For this pawn. So which one of white's pieces is very awkward and misplaced? Yeah, the queen. So
bishop to a6, you could e6, you maybe with the queen.
So what other advantages does black have? Right. Right, so you're ahead in development, your opponent's not developed completely, this queen is really misplaced, so you have a lot of compensation, but we want to do something, capitalize on it, otherwise it's going to take our opponent's couple moves to catch up. There are different kinds of advantages, so if your advantage is that you're ahead in development, that's very temporary, because if your opponent catches up, then where's your advantage? There are more long-term advantages. If your opponent has an isolated pawn, that's long-term, because that isolated pawn is always going to be isolated. So if your opponent is behind in development, you want to keep putting pressure to stop your opponent from developing the pieces. So bishop a6, very good idea. Now we're trying to trap this queen. And there's also a practical point of view. So we can't always calculate the most accurate moves. We cannot figure everything out in chess. So it's good to be practical. So if it's easier for you to play moves, then the burden is on your opponent to figure out what they're doing. So for black, it's very easy to play because all the pieces have very natural squares to go to. So bishop is attacking, knight is attacking, I'm threatening the queen, my bishop is open, my queen is doing something. So all of black's pieces make sense. For white, every move white has to figure out, how am I going to develop my pieces? How am I going to stop my opponent from trapping my queen? So especially, again, in this faster time controls, you don't have the time to like sit down, think for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, figure out the position. So you're kind of playing on instinct, and it's very easy for your instincts to go wrong when you're in this kind of situation. So here white had to start thinking about how to save this queen. So how can we... So, I mean, black's position is already really nice because the c4 pawn is weak, this queen is in trouble, so at least we're going to get a pawn back. So how can white try to save this queen?
Queen to c5. Getting ready to exit the area. The rook slides over. Yeah,
so but unfortunate thing about queen c5 is you're also going to run into another tempo with rook c8. So white needs to start exchanging pieces to release this tension. Because black's pieces are very active and white's pieces are passive. So of course exchanges are going to benefit white in general. c5. So c5, two purposes. So attacking the bishop, attacking the knight, creating a square for my queen. So black would have to take. So now move like queen c4, so your queen is still not so comfortable. And now we're playing against this bishop too, because this knight stopping the bishop. So this pawn is going to be weak. Not clear how you're going to save this pawn. Probably you can. You have to give it up. So white still has problems, but at least our queen can run away maybe. And at least we managed to exchange some pieces, so we're not under that much pressure. Instead, so if you try to play queen c5, yeah, I'm simply going to take And now I'm threatening this. Take the knight, take the bishop. And then next, oops. If you move, then I'm going to play here. And then now I'm actually winning a pawn. And again, you're not developed and not exactly sure where your pieces are going. No, actually here, maybe I can even play rook d8 and threaten bishop d4. Yeah, here rook d8 just wins. So tempo move, attacks the bishop, threatens bishop d4. So knight d5 was played. So white finds another way to try to release the tension. Exchange pieces. Of course, you cannot take. Lose the bishop. If you try to defend the bishop, okay, first of all, I can take, but even if I can't take, then I'm exchanging, so I'm happy. But of course, here you're losing material again because your queen is overworked. Okay, so knight d5. So what to do? So there's another reason behind knight d5. Can you play rook c8 and trap my queen? No. Yeah. So you have to play this rook because this rook just doesn't make sense. This pawn hangs. So this rook. Now I have a fork. So white is really trying to keep his position together. So what to do? So I want to keep the pressure on. So I want to look at tempo moves again. Right, so e takes f4. So there's knight, oops. So if knight f4, there's a line, I'll show you and then I'll explain the line to you. So queen e4, same ideas, trying to trap this queen, bishop d4 is coming. So maybe you might even want to chase this knight away and win the bishop. So bishop goes to f3. So do we take the pawn or do we throw in a check? Why? Well, the king's gonna run away. And now we're gonna take. So what's the difference between doing this and this? How does the king being on h1 different than the king being on g1? Exactly. So in this position, right. So now your rook is hanging and it's not protected. So if you take, I'm gonna take. So white exchanged queens. The queen didn't get trapped, at least. But again, the position is very tough. This bishop is hanging. This bishop is a monster. And it's going to be very hard for white to continue this development of the pieces. So instead, bishop d3. So black just defends the pawn. So I was talking about in a different class, like when is it okay to make this kind of moves and when is it not? Why is it okay to make this move? Because usually we don't push the pawns in front of our king. Who has more control of the position? Why? Right, because black is covering more squares and black is covering key squares. So I'm covering central squares. So it looks like white's pieces are aiming at the king, but they're kind of scattered. So this bishop looks very strong on the diagonal and looks like I improved this bishop. But this bishop alone cannot checkmate because it's just a bishop. So the bishop needs a queen, but the queen is on c7. And there is no way for the queen to get on the diagonal with the bishop to help. The knight on d5 looks very nice, but the knight on d5 cannot do anything to my king, and it looks nice, but it's actually in reality it's under attack. And also we're restricting our opponent's bishop. And we have this nice pawn chain, and we're giving our queen an extra square. So queen c5. So actually the queen on c5 is not a good square because there's a potential problem. So which piece does it line up with? Right, so if we can make somehow bishop d4 work, we're gonna win a queen. So our next move I think should be obvious. So rook d8. So the knight cannot, let's say, capture because bishop d4. And black has a simple threat. So if I pass the move to black, simply want to take. Nope. And everything's hanging. So knight c7. So where do we want to go with the queen? Out of all places, you want to put your queen on c8. So actually c8 is very dangerous. So c8 you might be in a lot of trouble. So what if I take, defending my queen? And all of a sudden, this queen went from doing nothing to, yeah. Ah, I see what you mean. So here, queen c8. So if I take, you still want to check. That's fair. Kind of want to start sacrificing stuff like take on g5 or you want to go queen f. Yeah, I might actually just play queen f5. Not there. So threatening bishop d4. So the thing is, there are a lot of moves that are good. So actually, the move that Caruana played wasn't even the best move. But like, why do you want to put your queen on c8? So question is, your bishop on a6, it served the purpose, but it's not really doing much. So it would be much better if in the future your bishop could go here. Because it's going to be on the longest diagonal aiming at this pawn. So what would be the best square for the queen? Keeping in mind you're still threatening bishop d4, so your bishop is not hanging. Right, so queen g4 was actually the best move because you're threatening bishop b7. And if your opponent tries to trade queens, okay, so we want a pawn and we have this dominating bishops. Still unclear where this guy is going. And also unclear. So here I can actually trap your knight because you have some back rank issues. So even if we take the queens off, it doesn't really solve a lot of white's problems because this development issue is just always there. So instead he played queen h6. So king runs away. So bishop improves. And bishop was under attack. So queen f5. So what's white's worst piece? White. Okay, rook on a1, but for now, I mean, that's like the least of white's problems. So there's a really misplaced piece for white. The knight. So you always have to ask yourself questions to find moves. Otherwise, you're just looking at a position and it's just pieces that don't make sense. So how do we attack this knight? Queen c6, a little bit unfortunate, I have to say. Yeah. Otherwise, queen c6, yeah, very nice.
Well, bishop takes pawn, check. No, I'm sorry, it's not going to work.
Oh, I see what you want to do. You want to take.
Yeah.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, it's still not good enough.
So let's improve a piece and attack a knight. Rook d7, so multi-purpose move. I want to double my rooks and I'm attacking your knight. So he went c5. So take, take. So this whole part, this was nothing fancy. So I take your knight. And now we want a pawn. So we improved our position. So we want a pawn. Our bishops are very strong. They're like fianchettoed bishops. So we have this little annoyance, but our queen is there defending. No other piece can come and attack, and our own bishop is very strong. And this bishop, we're on move 23, and this bishop hasn't developed yet. So bishop finally develops. But there is something awkward about that bishop being there. Right, so there's two bishops on the d file. So let's do it with a tempo. If rook d8, the bishop still defended. So because the queen is defending it. So we have to chase the queen away. Rook c5, right. So always better to do things with force. Your opponent doesn't have time to defend. Now rook d8. So what to do with white? You're losing a piece. What happens if I go queen e2? Yep. Cannot defend everything. So if you go rook f3, I'm simply going to go back, and you don't have rook here because I just take. And black's pieces just work so great together. So, oops. Okay, so what to do with white so that we don't lose a whole piece? And this is a common thing that happens in a game. So if you're going to lose a piece, you want to get some pawns for it, or you don't want to just lose a piece for nothing. You always want to have something for it. All right, bishop b4. And now black to move. Rook g3, very nice move. So question, what's wrong with rook h? Or does rook h3 work actually? Same thing. Yeah, so unfortunately there's bishop g1. So rook g3. Spins. And it's just like everything just really came together in black's position. Fabiano is when he plays like a machine. Like he says this stuff instantly. So here, take on c5 looks very strong. Let's see if bishop g2 works. So you always want to first calculate your forced lines. If those don't work, then you can go for something else. But if you have a forced win, then just end the game. So bishop g2, king g1. Keep in mind now your rook is hanging.
Right, so then bishop to f3, you win the queen.
Right, so bishop f3 and white resign. Okay, so let's see the line. So here, we're going to check. We don't want to lose our queen, so check. So we're threatening mate. So he has to take. Take. And now we can count. So once we calculate a line, the most important thing is to evaluate the position. So you want to make sure you started, you ended up better or at least the same than where you started. So you don't want to calculate a line and you're worse, but you still play it. So we have a queen and bishop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against 3 pawns. This is hanging, this is hanging. King is still weak, so of course black is completely winning, and at that level there's no point of playing out the game. So after bishop f3, I believe he resigned, yeah. So it was a nice victory for Caruana. Yeah, so this was first of Topalov 3 losses. So this is how it all started for Topalov, but of course it was really great to see Caruana win such a powerful game. what day is tomorrow? So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they're playing again. So we have those games, and then we're gonna have games again. So I mean, the way they're playing, obviously, we're gonna get some more exciting games. And it's gonna be blitz, so it's gonna be even better with everything hanging. So thank you for coming to the lecture.